Hello everyone, and we are right here right now, part 6 of We Are Who We Are, and it is the end of an era. The only thing we know about this time period is it takes place during the election cycle, and now we are at the end of it. And it seems like the theme for all these characters is how to adjust, right? So how do you kind of give everybody what they want and kind of balance how people see you and how you really are, without getting kind of lost in the images or kind of getting lost in trying to keep up with how people want to see you. And this whole episode, like, it kind of teases all these dark turns, right, up until the end. And this is set up right away because in the first, like, 30 seconds, I really thought Danny or somebody was going to come up right behind her and just hit her. Like, there was just some type of, like, maybe I was the only one, but the way they framed it was so clever and really appropriate for the whole episode. So it seems like Kate and her father have come to some type of truce or agreement, and they seem to be back on like some friendly terms, but it's clear that he's really watching over her now. He's not putting her on the back burner, and the source of their attention is Fraser. And the time period again is quite clever because we skip over a lot of their development, right? Like, we skip over so much, but despite that, I feel their development, like I feel the character growth episode to episode. Like, you can feel that it's been months, especially with Caitlin. Right away, like, she's now wearing Fraser's clothes in public, she's working out, she refuses to use the change room, and there's all these little tidbits of information, like nothing is given to you outright. And when you kind of look at how Fraser and Caitlin have kind of developed, Caitlin is really kind of owning who she is, right? Like, this kind of girly Kate is now gone. Like, she's no longer trying to please anybody but herself. And they have all these kind of unsettling conversations because, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like, I feel like she had started maybe hormone treatment. She's not using the women's locker room because she doesn't feel comfortable with that. There's a few conversations with her and Fraser in this first 5 minutes before they part ways for the rest of the episode, where she kind of says, I have to stop kissing, like I'm not going to kiss anybody anymore, like I don't want to do anything, which suggests like she's been on some dates. Like, again, we've skipped over a lot of things, but they have this very eerie conversation about how would you kill yourself. And she goes, well, how about hanging? How about drowning? How about this and that? And she makes the point of saying that when she was a kid, she put her dad's gun in her mouth, and she almost saw, she had a gun in her mouth, and nobody really knew why because she seemed like such a happy little girl. And this happy little girl image throughout, like even rewatching the episode, it's really interesting because Fraser is someone who outwardly cares what people think, right? Like, you can see that he's bothered. You can see that he's kind of like he wears his heart on his sleeve, like he's very transparent. But Kate, on the other hand, it doesn't look like, it's hard to know what she's thinking, right? But after this story and after watching her, she also cares a lot about what people think, specifically about disappointing people, right? Like, up until this point, she's had this good girl image, like she's, you know, she had her long hair, she fit in, she's kind of quintessential like baby girl. And I think even just watching her with her father on this camping trip, she doesn't want to disappoint him, right? Like, I think a lot of her fear and anxiety comes from disappointing her father, or just basically not, or like breaking their hearts. And this is something that you can see little snippets of because she's so good at, although she talks back, she tries to find balance, right? Like, she kind of finds a way to talk to her father that maintains the relationship, talk to Fraser that maintains the relationship. And it seems like this pressure is really building, and it's starting to get to her. And the only time we see Fraser and Kate together is in the beginning. And Fraser, I mean, he's such an interesting kid, right? Like, they're walking around campus, and he has The Kindly Ones, which is about a crazy Nazi soldier, and he's reading it on a US military base. Like, there's so many little things here. And they're kind of two peas in a pod, right? Like, he kind of says, what are we doing this weekend? And I feel like ever since they met, they've really spent the majority of their time together. But based on this camping trip, it seems like her father doesn't want her hanging out with Fraser. Like, maybe they came to some type of truce, but he does not like Fraser, right? So after the first sort of 10-15 minutes of the show, they part ways. And one of the best scenes is when, it's after school, she goes to see her father, and the look that Richard gives Fraser, like, you could cut the air. Like, it was just, he looked at him like he wanted to run him over with his truck. Like, he was not having it. And they have this kind of freeze frame. Like, they do these little moments, and they're very cinematic. And I think one of the best parts of this whole episode is this music video. So Fraser is watching his best friend leave, and it seems like they're getting cut off, like they're running out of time, and you know, their friendship just really got started. Like, yes, we've skipped a lot over like kind of their beginning and this kind of honeymoon period, but now that they're fully comfortable with each other and now that Kate is like kind of embracing it, it feels like they have no time left, right? And it's kind of exemplified through this music video. And this damn song, like, he keeps playing the song. Like, if you notice in the show, he has played every version of this song. Like, there's a lot of versions of the song, and he listens to every single version. And at first, I thought it was like super annoying, and then I started bopping to it myself. You know, like, even if you know, like, I find myself just thinking about it. And I think this music video again there's something so nostalgic about it, right? And it doesn't feel nostalgic until you get to the end of the episode, and then you look back on it and you're like, ooh, that was kind of like low-key sad. And it's almost like he's thinking about a memory, like he's thinking, but Kate is right there, which again suggests they're running out of time. And they have their New York hats on, and they're wearing their Nikes, and I really thought this was the best. The song really grew on me. And Fraser, for me, especially when you consider that this music video is coming out of his own mind, and they kind of reenact the actual music video, is really, I think, again, Fraser is someone who really cares about Caitlyn. He's very self-aware, and he's able to kind of articulate his feelings or label his feelings a lot better than Caitlyn is at the moment. And this is like, if you've ever had a best friend, there's always one best friend that feels the friendship more strongly than the other. And I think Fraser is the one that feels this best friendship like strongly. And he wants to do everything with her. Like, he's in the music video, and we've all imagined ourselves doing this type of thing, but he's with his bestie, right? Like, they're doing the same moves, they like the same song, they're lip syncing. And, you know, just watching them be in sync and watching them dance, I think for Fraser is just like, he wants to do everything with Caitlyn, right? Like, this is his best friend. He wants to experience things with her. He wants to, like, this is not just like a high school friendship for him. Like, this is his bestie. He wants to be connected to her. And I really love this scene. Like, I like the way it was shot. I like the music style of it. I love the way it cut in and out as they're dancing. And then we come back to reality, and Fraser is just disoriented, right? Like, he's so in his own head that he just, sometimes it feels like he's going through the motions, and he's kind of on his way. And again, the whole episode, they're kind of separate and they're kind of apart. And they're trying to, especially with Caitlyn, and I'm going to start with Caitlyn because there's an interesting conversation that she has with both Sara and that Fraser again has with Sara in terms of people trying to define what's in the best interest of somebody else without actually asking the person whose best interest they're trying to decide on, if that makes sense. So Caitlyn and Richard are off. They are off on their camping trip, and right away, like, Caitlyn is over it. Like, when you compare Caitlyn to when she was boating with her dad and when she was kind of running after him, like, to try and be on all these boating trips, and how sad she was when he had left her. Now she doesn't even want to go with him, right? Like, she doesn't want to go camping with him. She wants to hang out with Fraser. She wants to text. She wants to chill. Like, she wants to be with her friends. And this is sad for Richard because that's just what happens growing up. Like, you don't want to hang out with your parents anymore. Like, you're just kind of like, oh, we really have to do this. And they're in the car, and this is a truck that she wasn't even there for, right? Like, she didn't come with him. And he's trying to talk about the truck. He's like, yeah, you can, you know, play whatever music you want. Like, the accessories are awesome. And the accessories is something that he'd been kind of whispering about in the last episode or the episode before. And so he really likes his truck, and she's so disinterested, right? She's just like, oh, just leave me alone. Like, and there's so many little things, right? Because if you notice, like, she takes off her earrings. And what that suggests for me is, I don't think that Richard knows that this is not a phase, right? Like, he thinks she's just a tomboy. Like, this is some type of new way, like, kids will be kids. So there's some type of cognitive, like, dissonance here. Like, he's not fully seeing what's going on with Caitlyn. And Caitlyn is kind of balancing, trying to give her father what he wants, which is his baby girl, but at the same time, like, allowing herself to dress how she wants to dress and kind of be who she wants to be. So they're in this car, and this has to be like the most awkward car ride. He's like, okay, what do you want to play? And he's playing some country music. And to be honest, before you're like, oh, why is a black guy playing country music? Like, my dad listens to country music. Like, country music, Richard is somebody who likes lyrics. You know what I mean? He actually listens to what he's like, you can bash him, but the song was kind of, like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I Shazammed the song. Like, it was kind of banging. Like, it was very chill. And he's looking at her and he's like, okay, like, what do you listen to? Like, I don't know anything about you. Like, he's asking her personal questions because he really just, he's like, what the, like, who are you? And she's like, I don't know, like, damn, like, if you like it, it's fine. You don't, like, leave me alone, like, shit. And he's like, what do you mean? You got your headphones in all the time, which she does, right? She sits in her room, she puts her headphones on, she's just kind of zoned out. So for him, it's like, okay. And I love what she said, right? She's like, I like what I like. I don't, you know, if you like it, it's fine. Like, I'm not judging you. I'm not here to like fight with you. And Caitlyn, again, like, all she knows is what she feels, but she's unable to articulate it, right? Like, she doesn't even really know what she's going through yet. She just knows she has to start, but where this will end up, like what it will look like, it's hard, right? Because there's how she feels and how she looks like, and like trying to merge the two is not something that she has the vocabulary for, or there's no one for her to talk to about this besides maybe Sara, but that's even kind of dangerous because whatever Caitlyn's feeling, she really loves her father, and for her to kind of, again, she doesn't want to put him in unnecessary pressure, and she's kind of going through things internally, right? Like, she really internalizes a lot, and I think she's kind of at a loss for words. So that's all she could say, right? Like, I like what I like. What do you want from me? You know, I'm trying to figure it out. And this whole trip from beginning to end, like, she is just over it, right? Like, he's setting up, and if you compare her in the beginning of the series, like, she used to help him, she used to move things around, and now she's like trying to find the signals so she can talk to Fraser, and just because she doesn't want anything to do with it. And I think part of the reason that Richard took her on this trip is because he felt some type of way, maybe about Sara teaching his daughter how to shoot when, you know, he's a great marksman himself. So he's trying to get the relationship back, but she's just kind of over it. And some of it is what she's going through, and a lot of it is just growing pains, right? Like, your kids they don't want to hang out with you no more. Like, it's not personal, it's just, you know, it's weird. They go on this camping/hunting trip. They take this sort of boat. And I have to say, the scenery, even with Fraser's date that we'll get to later, is just spectacular. Like, the ocean, it's so calming, the show. And there's so much going on. Like, the way they balance this kind of like chill tone with all this kind of really serious conversation, again, really speaks to the fact that the most dramatic moments happen in the most kind of everyday setting, right? Like, they don't happen, there's no build up to it. The conversations either happen or they don't happen. So they go on this camping trip and they go on this hunting trip and they're having all these conversations. And again, she never really warms up to him, right? Like, you see her dad doing all the work. He's the one kind of putting all the logs together. He's the one kind of doing everything. And she's still trying to get a signal. And he's not dumb. He's like, you've been trying to get a signal since you got in the car, like, and she kind of makes up some bullshit, like, yeah, I was trying to go to the bathroom, like, and he's pretty balanced, right? Like, Richard, like, I really like how he plays Richard because it really feels like somebody's dad, right? Like, he's trying to have these conversations, but like, he's trying to be patient because he doesn't want her to block him out, so I really enjoy their relationship. So she finally is able to sit down. This camping trip is like semi-successful, and finally she's able to find stillness, and he's kind of doing all the work, right? Because he wants to talk to her. Like, he doesn't want to push her too much because everybody knows that when your parents want to have a serious conversation with you, it's either like they kind of set up food, right? Like, it's either over dinner or a long drive. This camping trip, this long drive, the purpose of it is like, we got to talk, right? Like, this is not really a camping trip. This is some serious shit, we gotta speak. And what he wants to speak about straight up is Fraser, right? Like, this is the source of all their tension. As far as Richard knows, they had no problems before this kid came. So it has to be him. And he's really trying, right? He's looking at her, he's like, are you dating? Like, do I have to confiscate your phone? Like, you've been texting this dude since. And again, like, he's just a dad, right? Like, as far as he's concerned, you're texting a boy, and maybe she's trying, like, I think he thinks that Caitlyn is changing herself to be cool, or to be like, kind of have Fraser like, you know what I mean? That's kind of the perspective he's coming from. That's not it, right? And he's like, okay, so are you dating? Because that's impossible. Like, he's gay, right? Like, he has to be gay. The dude seems gay. And the way he set that out, Caitlyn is just like, no, we're not dating. She doesn't, you know, she's like, I don't know how to explain this to you. And the best line was, there's so many little lines in this episode, like, you don't catch it until the second time you watch it. But it's very clever. And she's trying to explain, like, we have a lot in common, like, we're friends, like, it's not about what it looks like. So please stop focusing on what it looks like. Because Richard is someone who, like, appearances matter, right? Like, he can kind of go off, as far as he's concerned, like, Caitlyn physically changed, so she must be a totally different person. And her whole point is, no, like, I'm still the same person. I'm just trying to match what I'm feeling on the inside to the outside. And he goes like, how does a fashion victim, and she's like, you know, we have a lot in common and this and that. And he's like, how can a fashion victim from New York, like, what do you have in common? And that just killed me, because he really is a fashion victim from New York. Like, no shade to Fraser, but like, he's doing the most sometimes. And she's like, well, he's not only that. Like, he seems this way, but he's not. And the best thing she said, he's not only that, right? Like, people are not one thing or another. And like, what you look like can never encompass everything you are, right? Like, you have to project an image onto the world. Some people, you know, they project a very professional image, but maybe they have a very illustrious, like, you know, outdoor life or personal life. So you can never judge a book by its cover, right? People have a lot going on, and nobody's one thing or another. And there's just no way to encompass everything you are through a label or through what people look like. You can't ever assume things about people's personality, you know, kind of like that. And that's what Richard does, right? He's like, listen, that's the image you're giving off, so that's just who you must be. And Caitlin is doing a good job of trying to, like, negotiate with her father without being combative, but he's really kind of frustrated because she's not giving him straight answers, right? Like, she's not being direct, but there's no direct answer to give, right? Like, this is not something, I can't say yes or no. Like, these are not yes or no questions. And he's trying to frame it as such. And she kind of says, well, what about you and mom? Like, you're so different. Because his concern is, again, Richard thinks that she's changing and she's doing all these things to get Fraser to like her more. And his whole point is, listen, you don't want to change yourself or do more. Basically, you don't want to do too much, especially for people who can't love you, right? And which is really ironic, because everything about Richard is like, you can't handle the truth. Like, his whole vibe is, and when he said that, I'm like, Caitlin is just looking at him like, it's actually you that can't handle it, right? Like, it's actually Richard who can't handle the truth, not Fraser. And she kind of bites back at him and says, what about you and mom? And Richard and Jenny are just, you know, they came together kind of, they both kind of got, they were at different places in their lives, right? But the longer things go on for, especially if the foundation is, like, if Richard, for better or worse, he is who he is, right? Like, what you see is what you get. Like, that's just who he is. Whether or not you like it, whether or not you don't, is irrelevant, because that's just who he is. Jenny, on the other hand, is not who she is, right? Like, she kind of came into the relationship under a false pretense and adjusted to how he was. And so for him, it's like, well, we used to want the same things and now we don't. But it's like, you never actually wanted the same things. You're just kind of now realizing it. And this conversation about being an adult and who wants the same things and who can love who is really interesting, especially when you consider parents and their children, right? Because ideally, you want your child to be exactly like you, or just kind of be like, have life easier for them. Because for Richard, it's like, listen, it's already hard enough being black, and now you want to shave your head and do all these things. Like, he's thinking in terms of just what he's projecting a lot onto her that maybe he's gone through and what he's seen. But there's a lot of people on this show deciding on people's best interests without actually consulting with the person, without trying to find balance with the person. It's just like, listen, everything he says is a statement. Like, you don't want to love somebody who can't love you back. You don't want to do this. You know, you treat me like I'm stupid. You treat me like someone who doesn't know anything. You treat me like, you know, and he's like, I'm not stupid. And I do know what's going on. Like, your phone and just your whole vibe is changing. And I think the point of Richard is kind of his last point, where he's like, you know, I'm not stupid. I'm not this, I'm not that. I think the whole point was to really kind of say, listen, you're not gonna tell me that this is a phase, right? Because as much as Richard maybe wants to believe that it's a phase, he can feel that something is wrong or that something is changing fundamentally. And parents always can kind of clue in on that, especially if they have like this type of relationship. So he can't really, whether or not he wants to face the truth, whether or not he's even interested, we don't know. But he's really trying hard to reset the relationship when in fact, there's nothing to reset. Like, people grow and change. Like, you can't revert back to how the way things were, because that Kate no longer exists. So he needs to figure that out. So over time, this camping trip gets slightly better. They go on this shooting, they go shooting together, and he's giving her instructions, and it's the same instructions that Sara gave. And I wonder if she purposely kind of forgot Sara's instructions in order to kind of please her dad. But again, they still bond, and she still enjoys her time with him, right? Like, she doesn't want to let go of this relationship. And she really doesn't want, because she really respects her father, and I think a lot of her ideas of masculinity and what it means to be a dad does come from her dad, right? Like, not just physically, but just how a man carries himself and how he raises his family. And she has a very traditional view of masculinity while at the same time trying to, balance this, all these feelings that she's having. So in the end, the camping trip became really good, and she kind of gave him what she wanted. She put the phone away. She stopped texting Fraser, and the stuff that she was texting him was like, what if he's a serial killer? What if he's this and that? So slowly she kind of gave him what he wanted to kind of find, again, some truth. But it's really funny because it's really interesting because they come back and she needs a shower because, again, she hasn't showered at school, and it seems like they just got in the car, right? So for I guess we can assume for 3 days she hadn't taken a shower. And he kind of says, they kind of go their separate ways. But before she takes the shower, he says, oh, my beautiful baby girl, right? Like, I'm so glad things are back. Like, the way he said it, right? Like, I'm so glad things are back to the way they were. Like, thank God. And I think for Richard, this was successful. But for Caitlin, it just added this whole layer. And I'm telling you, this whole episode was light. And then it just took this very dark, eerie, unsettling tone. Because she gets back from this trip, she sees Sara, she gets this brochure, and we finally find out that she is she's having hormone injections. And the way she's kind of taught herself, or the way that she's navigating this largely, is through YouTube, right? Like, this is all she can do because she doesn't know who to ask. And she has to be careful, right? Because if she asks Fraser, maybe he'll tell Sara, and this could get her father in trouble. And I think she's thought about all these things even though she hasn't voiced them. And watching her watch this video, you can see that she's very uneasy. And meanwhile, like, her parents are arguing in the background about laundry or something. And the video is just saying, like, you gotta relax your leg and I don't know, the scenery of this and just her tension throughout was really unsettling because she's going through this alone. And sadly, a lot of people go through these transitions alone because they don't know who to ask. Second, they're way too afraid. And third, she's a kid, right? Like, what if her father institutionalizes her? What if something bad happens, right? Like, what if it just causes all these problems and she doesn't want to be a source of conflict, right? Like, there's a reason why she was moonlighting as Harper, like, at night, because she didn't want anybody to see her and she didn't want to, like, draw attention to herself. So this whole scene, the fact that it was done in the dark, especially when you compare Harper at the beginning, was, again, it suggests that nothing will ever be the same. And it's kind of like illuminated through the election, but more so than that, like, Kate is really trying to balance people's expectations. And the best way I can kind of explain it, and I think the show is really clever because they use this video from Karl Lagerfeld and Sara. So again, Sara gives her a brochure and says, you know what, it's time to change the world, but we can't change the world unless we know ourselves. And Kate only knows what she feels. She can't label things, and she doesn't really want to label it yet, right? Like, she's just trying to navigate this. And she doesn't want people, that's the thing, people are quick to fight for you without asking you what you think. And they're giving her information and they're not really giving her time to digest this information. And this, like, again, what Kate's going through, when you add what Sara said and then the whole video with Karl Lagerfeld, I think it's a brilliant commentary on this episode because the whole video with Karl Lagerfeld was saying how artists and just people in general have to adjust. Like, you constantly have to adjust to the times. And the minute that you think your past is better, your present becomes secondhand and your self vintage, right? And this is what Kate is trying to balance, right? You have to be interested about what's going on around you. You have to be informed. You have to know, you have to be like an antenna taking in all the images, taking in all this information, because otherwise you will get lost in the images, right? Like, you really have to figure out, how do you give people what you want without really losing yourself in the process? And this is something that Kate is struggling with because she loves her relationship with her father. At the same time, she's taking in all these images, she's watching YouTube videos, she's trying to balance what Richard wants, right? Like, she wears earrings to kind of give him this feeling that it's a tomboy, but really it's something else. She's kind of going through all these things and she's like, well, I'm still me, right? That's the whole point of this. This is what she's trying to communicate to her father, like, I'm still me. Like, we can still have these moments, but you have to kind of accept that we're moving forward. And I think a lot of Kate's struggles is she looks back at her old self and she really enjoys this time, right? She really enjoys all these things, but if she keeps trying to maintain it in its entirety, then the person that she's becoming will become vintage, right? Like, you're not going to be who you are or who you want to be because you're too busy trying to please everybody. You're trying to like take in all this information, and you're listening, but nobody's really listening to you. So I don't know, I really enjoyed this commentary, this bit with Karl Lagerfeld about how do you adjust to people's expectations without losing yourself, because people have to adapt, but these adaptations should make you the best version of yourself, right? Not hide who you are. And for someone like Kate, who's still trying to figure out what we are, like who she is and what it looks like, and like these are questions that she's just starting to answer, right? And this will take a lot of years to figure out. So something about watching her in that room by herself is just like, at this point, that's all she can do to balance it, right? Like, she has to do this in the dark, because as much as she knows that she's changing and this relationship with her father will change, she doesn't want to destroy her, right? Like, she wants to gradually ease him into it. But it's just heartbreaking, you know? It's like, this is not something you should go through alone. But realistically, like, who are you going to ask? And what are the consequences of this, right? Like, you don't know how Richard will react to this. And it seems like he's kind of in denial himself. But all this to say, this question about who decides on what's important and what should be important to people and important, you know, all these things, is not just true for Fraser, but it's not just true for Caitlin, but it's true for Fraser, right? So the majority of this episode, they've been apart and they're trying to find themselves, and Fraser finally has the date of his life, but not before telling Sara. And it's really interesting because if you notice, okay, first thing he does is he grabs this book, the 27 Club. Basically, if you remember, Jonathan wanted to be a rock star, and this is kind of his kind of little cute little gift to him. And everything Fraser does is very thoughtful and very in the best interest, right? Like, as great as Fraser is in terms of helping Caitlin, there's just something about him that's also, like, he doesn't even see his flaw, right? So he goes over and his mom kind of, you know, catches him trying to put something on Jonathan's desk, and he gets really frustrated, right? He's like, you seem to always know what you want or what people are good for. And anyways, anytime he talks to his mother, it just gives me anxiety, because it's just jarring, right? Like, it's jarring for the whole base. Like, they're all just kind of looking at him like, will somebody just discipline this child? Like, damn. But he tells his mom, right? He tells his mom that Kate is grounded, that because of her hair, because of this and because of that. And Sara is Richard's boss, right? Like, Sara is somebody, and she already doesn't like Richard, and now, you know, she sees him as this abusive parent, which kind of goes back to how people are very, you know, people will sometimes think they're defending your honor when in fact they're putting you in a more precarious situation, and instead of buying you more time, they're buying you less time. So although Fraser told his mom out of good intention, this affects Caitlin, right? Because now this is going to cause stress between Richard and Sara, and however much longer Fraser and Caitlin have with one another, we're not really sure. But again, it kind of just goes back to people kind of voicing what they think, and this idea of right and wrong without ever consulting the person who they're kind of commenting on, right? So Richard and Sara are a whole other thing, but finally Fraser gets the date of his life. He leaves the book there, and Sara, I'm not gonna say Sarah's a bad mom, because you guys let me know, like, how do you feel about Sarah as a parent? So she sees that Fraser left Jonathan this book, and she kind of says, okay, Jonathan, like, being here is not very stimulating for him. You know, he's from New York, and, you know, like, he could use a little bit of, and, you know, the way she phrased it kind of like, I was kind of unsteady with it, because if she said, oh, he could use a father figure or a big brother, she said stimulation. And that's just such a weird word to use when you're talking about your teenage son. And this whole Jonathan storyline is like, I really hope they keep it PG. And Jonathan's like, okay. And I think Jonathan is someone, again, like, this is his boss, and he's trying to get in her good graces. So I do think a lot of what he does is to please her. At the same time, like, a lot of his little, like, flirty behaviors could be a cultural thing, because American men aren't really like this. But in other countries, men are more, you know, they're more touchy-feely with each other. They kiss each other, like, hello. Like, it could be just a cultural thing. But whatever the reason, Jonathan kind of takes the message, and he says, okay, I'll take Fraser out. But a few things to note here. Sara doesn't consult with Maggie about anything. And, you know, this is a 30-year-old man. And as they're kind of watching Fraser go on his date, and he's been re-listening to the same damn message, like, he's really excited, right? He got the message. And it's a little sad because the reason Jonathan initiated this is because his boss asked, right? So there is some redeemable qualities here. Like, he didn't just ask him on his own. He got permission from his mother. And Sara seems to, everything she does, like, she acts like a single parent, right? She doesn't consult with Maggie. Maggie's annoyed. It seems like she's been texting Jenny all day. And Maggie's like, you don't think I'd want to know that he's going out with a 30-year-old man? Like, you don't think, like, how come you don't consult me about these things? And Sara's hella selfish, right? Like, the reason she does this is because she wants time alone with Maggie, because you sense that she can sense that there's something going on with her. And this whole shot, this whole slow motion shot, there's so much unsaid, right? Because at one point Maggie says, you know, can't know, can't ever know, which suggests that Maggie doesn't actually know who the father of Sara's child is. And I wonder how Sara got pregnant. Like, it could have been an assault or something like this, because from what we know of Maggie, like, she's been in Fraser's life since the beginning, like, since they were a child. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels like Sara met Maggie like 2 years ago and they got married. So it doesn't feel like this is someone who'd been raising this child since they were a kid. So I don't, you know, it's jarring. So Sara has gone out of her way to really make Fraser her kid and no one else's. And I'm not sure if that's coming from a defensive place. Whatever the case, they get some time alone. And this is the first time I'm seeing Sara and Fraser's like mannerisms. Like, they're very similar. They have the same kind of erratic movements, and they just kind of hug, and they're just so touchy-feely, right? And this is such a, like, when you look at her in her uniform and in her jersey, like, you're like, is this the same person? And she just wants intimacy, right? Like, she really just wants to connect with Sara, or she just really wants to connect with Maggie. And I really enjoyed these slow motion shots. I enjoyed the sort of face-to-face that you get in terms of just how people see each other and how kind of over each other they are, right? Like, is that what happens when you get married? You just go through these motions and you just talk in like all these cryptic languages. But whatever the case, Maggie has no choice but to accept. And they spend the day together, and off Jonathan goes. And this, again, there's so much like clever writing in the show, because Jonathan, again, Fraser gifted him with a book about the 27 Club, which is a bunch of rock stars that died at the age of 27. And Jonathan is somebody who also wanted to die at the age of 27 and become a rock star. And what does Jonathan do? He takes him to the biggest 27 club in the world, and he takes him to this mass gravesite, right? So it's a beautiful area, and you know, it's farmland, but in World War I, this is where 50,000 men died, bodies were mangled, unidentified. And he's like, this is the biggest 27 club. Like, you want to see a 27 club? Like, I will bring you here. And that was really clever, right? So he's really balancing like taking Fraser out and kind of accommodating him without making him feel too insecure. And they're so cute, right? So they're running around, and Fraser is so sensitive because, first of all, he's not the athletic type, point number one. Point number two, he kind of took that shit personally. He's not really dressed for this very long walk, and he goes, yeah, I love nature, I love green things, I love animals. And they're taking a piss, and he's like, you know, don't be careful for the green things, right? Like, Jonathan's kind of accommodating him, and you kind of see that Fraser has a crush, right? Fraser says first date, but the writing in this like episode on these little scenes, like don't piss on the green things, the 27 Club, like, it's really clever and very streamlined. And again, Jonathan is really just, he's keeping it like steady, you know what I mean? He doesn't fully kind of dive in. If he does touch him, it's always like, you know, there's always that like high five, like, yay. And thank God. Okay, so I didn't know where this episode was going. I was a little kind of concerned because I'm like, I really hope this doesn't take, because the whole Jonathan and Danny storyline are the ones where I'm like, please don't mess up on this. And they had a great day. He takes him around Italy. He takes him to the 27 Club. He, you know, they make all these cute jokes. And they get to this place, they get to this bar, and I'm like, oh no. They order wine. And thank God Jonathan's girlfriend walked in, because I was like, oof, okay, so that's not going to take a dark turn. Because I was a little concerned, I'm not going to lie. And Fraser's excited, right? He's about to toast Jonathan. He's like, thank God I met you in that theater. He's in love, right? He's looking at him. If you look at how Fraser is looking at Jonathan, he's like he's in love, right? He's like, oh, you're so pretty and you're so perfect. And it seems like it seems like Fraser has forgotten about New York, right? Like, he doesn't really want to go back. He hasn't brought up this person, Mark, in a really long time. and he moved on, right? Like time heals all wounds. And until this girlfriend came up, and you could like pinpoint the exact moment Fraser's heart like totally broke, right? Like he is just done. He's just so sad. But honestly, as an adult, I'm glad that he brought his girlfriend. And Jonathan is kind of like, I can see you're upset, but like, I'm a 30-year-old man. But it lightened the mood a bit, and it made everything kind of PG again, thank God. And this karaoke scene, when they're singing, I believe, we are my is that NSYNC? The one desire. I don't know, is it what I want? Is it Backstreet Boys? Oh my God, I'm actually blanking. Anyways, that karaoke bit was like really good. And again, you could see little snippets, right? Like he's trying to hug him, and he's just like get away from, like, yeah, like Jonathan. So after this episode, I have faith that they're not gonna like cross the line. He brought the girlfriend, he got Fraser home in time, right? Like it was a day trip, it wasn't an overnight trip. And Fraser hugs him closely, and he's like, this was the greatest night of my life. And Jonathan, again, I think he's a good guy. I think he's one of those people that can move like quite easily in different spaces, and nothing really gets to him, right? So he balanced it well. It was a fine line that he walked, he's like, don't go in there drunk. That whole date is just, it was a fine line. So he gets home, and his mom, of course, walks into the bathroom, and they have no personal space when it comes to each other, right? Like she's just like, I just want to be around you. I missed you. She grabs his clothes. She starts smelling them, and she's super happy. Meanwhile, Maggie's probably texting Jenny, but whatever the case, Fraser had a good time. Thankfully, it didn't cross the line. But they're trying, right? Like Fraser is getting over New York. He had a good night, but Fraser is someone who seems to be looking for the one, right? Like he's the type of person that looks at every single person as, he gets very excited. Like he has a crush, and especially at that age when your crush invites you out, you know what I mean? Like the whole listening to your text messages, like replaying it. I can relate to that. Like it's so exciting, especially when somebody older talks to you when you're a kid. That's the thing. Like it's not really on Fraser, I feel like. Like Fraser's behavior, I mean, yeah, it's kind of inappropriate, but it's really on Jonathan, right? Because when you're younger, especially as a teenager, you're not as self-aware as you think you are. And sometimes you want the attention from the adult, but it's really on the adult to kind of catch that this person doesn't know their boundaries yet. This person doesn't really know what this entails. And Jonathan, thank God, took the adult role, and he stopped himself, and we thank him for that. So the episode ends with Sara all by herself because Maggie's just checked out. I'm not really sure how their day went, but it seems like their relationship is based on sex, and they don't really communicate all that effectively. So the last scene we get is the timeline is over. It is the end of the era. Trump won. And Sara gets a phone call saying how many. So at this point, we can assume that maybe the men that she'd sent over had died, or like some type of tragedy happened on top of the election. So she runs off, and that's the last scene. And this whole last scene was really clever because we see that Trump won. So this is the end of the election period, and they're kind of going through the different scenarios, right? They're like, this is what happened. This Hillary Clinton lost because of this, and here are all the reasons. And there's this speech by Obama, and he's like, well, basically, we're all on the same team. It shouldn't really matter. And it's really interesting because up until this point, and I think this whole last sort of like scene as they're kind of playing the news is really wonderful, because we are now in an era where like labels are very important. People want to know who you are, what side you're on, and this and that. And Kate is pretty much the opposite, right? Like at this point, people are trying to label her. People are giving her brochures. They're giving her things like this and that. They want to know what we are. Even Fraser on his date, he's like, is this a date? Like, why does things have to be a date? Like, why can't we just hang out? And after Trump's election, like labels are becoming important. Like you can't just explore. Like people want to know what you are, what side you're on, this and that. And this is not beneficial, which is why Richard was pushing so hard. That's why Sara is giving brochures, because they want to know, Caitlin, like, what side are you on? Like, things are not, it was such an appropriate ending because things are complicated, right? Like, as much as Caitlyn is changing, she still loves her father. So that, it's like, why can't you take the good with both? Why do I have to be one side or the other? And in an era where, like, labels are important and people are experimenting and people are really trying to figure out who they are without pressure, without, it's probably, like, the worst possible thing that could happen to her at this time on a military base, right? Especially considering her father is a Trump supporter. So I don't know how that's going to go over. Like, now she really has to be in the dark, because how are you going to communicate this to people? How are you going to... And that's the thing, like, I think some people forget that contradictions can exist. Like, you can be two things at once. Like, you don't have to be one thing or the other. And there's a reason why people don't voice themselves. That's why people don't like, really exploring who they are in public, because people just, especially when you look at Caitlyn, like, everybody has an idea of what's in her best interest. People have an idea of what's good for her and what's not, but nobody ever consults with her, right? Like, nobody ever asks her what she thinks. And same with Sara, right? Like, she kind of tells Jonathan in so many words to take Fraser out, and Fraser thinks he did it on his own, right? Like, there's all these people who are so well-intentioned, but they don't understand the impact it's doing. They don't understand how that affects the person that they're supposedly helping out. And this ending was really clever because it kind of just marks a shift. It's the end of an era. Labels now are more important than ever. We can't just be anymore. We have to, like, explain. People want people want simple answers to complicated questions, and that's just it, right? So overall, I really love this episode. It was so clever in commentary, and it was so clever in the amount of things you can kind of unpack in terms of what's really going on beneath the surface. So the show is deceptively chill because there's so much heavy things going on in such a calm setting, right? Like, everything's so chill, and then you take a closer look and you're like, this is not chill. And the chill is now over, right? So whatever happened with Sara, we got 2 episodes left, so I'm enjoying the pacing so far. Like, we're picking up. So overall, an excellent episode. This is probably my second favorite show of the year, next to I May Destroy You. And my third, I think, is Normal People. But with that being said, let me know what you think, and until next week.
Let her know, I gotta let her know that she my white horse, she my medical. She like my baby mama, know how to take